You are listening to an After Dinner Conversation magazine podcast. After Dinner Conversation believes humanity is improved by ethics and morals grounded in philosophical truth, and that truth is discovered through intentional reflection and respectful debate. In order to facilitate this process, we have created a growing series of print books, a monthly short story magazine, and 2 different podcasts. This podcast, Philosophy Ethics Short Story Audiobooks, provides readings of stories that have appeared in our magazine, and we discuss them in our companion podcast, Philosophy Ethics Short Story Discussions. We hope you'll continue the discussion with friends, family, and students, or head over to the comments section on our website or Facebook page. And please subscribe to our podcast, share it on social media, and suggest it to friends. Thank you for supporting us through your magazine subscriptions and through patreon.com. Links are in the description. I'm Tina Forsey, an acquisition editor at After Dinner Conversation. This story is written by Sebastian Hoyle and was published in our August 2021 magazine. The Ascension Review of Xebob Zebble. Xebob Zebble sat in the hallway sweating, his heart racing, waiting for his Ascension review to begin. He knew it would be a long day and a tiring day, and that he would be peppered with questions from the Ascension review board for hours, perhaps even days. However, if he was successful in answering their questions about his life and his philosophy and the future of MalPar interactions, he could rest assured he would be selected for the honored position of Interaction Guide for life. Perhaps this is too much information for you all at once, and I need to put the sheer enormity of this moment in Xebob's life into perspective. Quidar is the planet the story takes place on, and it's important to know a bit about Quidar. Quidar is a planet of 14 billion inhabitants, and only 21 MalPars at any given time are selected to serve as interaction guides. Being selected as an interaction guide shows that you have lived an admirable life, that you have taken part in the most serious academic scholarship and have, over a period of 100 or more cycles, established yourself as a great mind and an otherwise deep thinker. To even be nominated, as they say, is an honor. The position is paid no salary. It doesn't have to be. Once your ascension is successfully reviewed and you are granted the position of interaction guide, you are a worldwide celebrity, royalty even. You are immune from laws, pay nothing in restaurants and shops, and are generally given the best seat in the house, no matter what house you are in, barring, of course, you're not in a house with a more senior interaction guide. The thing that worried Xebob, and the reason he was sitting in the hallway sweating and his heart was racing, was this. He was deciding if he was going to lie to the Ascension Review Board. You see, Xebob had a problem. In fact, almost all the MalPar-A's of his generation had a problem regarding their past interactions with MalPar-B's. This is another thing that is going to take some explanation. You see, over the cycles, like all planets, Quidar culture had changed. Throughout history, MalPar-A's ran the planet, and MalPar-B's were seen as little more than chattel, vaguely sentient pack animals. It was common for MalPar-A's to buy and sell MalPar-B's like livestock. There were stories and rhymes teaching MalPar-A children that the best way to keep a MalPar-B working hard was through discipline, meaning a hard metal rod. And this seemed to be a perfectly fine way to the MalPar-A's, for as long as anyone could remember. However, going back to just before Xebob's great-grandfather's time, things began to change. The MalPar-B's started to have a say. Not all of them, mind you, and not even the majority of them, but a few of them started to say, "Hey, we think we'd like it better if you beat us just a bit less." Well, naturally, all the MalPar-A's laughed at this idea, and nearly all of the MalPar-B's laughed at the idea as well. The MalPar-Bs would say, at least in public, the MalPar-As take such very good care of us so long as we obey them. The world is very complicated and very hard. Far too hard for us MalPar-Bs to understand. It's better for us, for all of us, to simply allow the MalPar-As to be in charge. This is what the MalPar-Bs would say in public, and this made very good sense to practically everyone, except for a few uppity MalPar-Bs who spoke differently in private when they were sure unfriendly ears weren't listening. But the idea didn't go away, and, bit by bit, whispered in corridors, in places of worship, and in homes. The thought virus spread, and people started to say, maybe they're right. Maybe we shouldn't beat our MalPar-Bs quite as much if we can help it. Maybe we just beat them when they've really got it coming. A controversial idea indeed. And by the time Xebob's grandfather was born, things were already starting to change. However, the yearly interaction guide proclamations were slow to catch on to the new maybe we should beat them less ideas being whispered in halls and homes. The interaction guide proclamations continued to say it was perfectly fine to beat your MalPar-Bs, to treat them like chattel, to force them to do labor, to sell them, and to darmal them, because, of course, there was nothing wrong with darmaling chattel, which everyone on the interaction guide agreed MalPar-Bs to be. But times change, and bit by bit, some MalPar-Bs started to think of themselves as something more than chattel. And once in a while, you would even hear talk from a MalPar-A that, while his MalPar-B wasn't a full-fledged Quidarian, maybe they weren't exactly chattel either. By the time Xebob's grandfather gave birth to Xebob's father, it was clear to almost everyone that MalPar-Bs probably weren't, in fact, chattel. Of course, there were less sophisticated parts, backwoods parts of Quidar, that didn't take any newfangled thoughts to heart. And of course, even in some sophisticated parts of Quidar, there were MalPar-As who liked the old ways better. But the times were changed, and as Xebob's father grew up, you would hear less and less talk about MalPar-Bs being chattel, and more talk that they were some kind of quasi-Quidarian. They couldn't own property, and they couldn't enter into contracts without the permission of their bound MalPar-A. But maybe, just maybe, they weren't exactly chattel either. It was also about this time that the first Quidarians said it probably wasn't okay to darmal a MalPar-B anytime you wanted. Of course, you could still darmal a MalPar-B sometimes, like if they were bound to you, or if they had had a history of being darmaled and not seeming to mind it too terribly much. As Xebob's grandfather would say, it wasn't the good old days where it was socially acceptable to just run around the planet darmaling every random MalPar-B you walked by. This is about the time Xebob was born, almost 100 cycles ago. When Xebob was young, Quidar was changing faster than ever. A young Xebob would hear his grandfather talk about the good old days when MalPar-As ran the show. Xebob's grandfather would say, just before he died, things have gotten to the point where a MalPar-A was just a second-class Quidarian. Of course, that wasn't true that MalPar-As were second-class Quidarians. Even today, with Xebob sitting in the hallway waiting for his Ascension review, MalPar-As pretty much run the show. They still control most of the resources on Quidar, and are responsible for most of the important decisions that are made. As of today, 3 MalPar-Bs are interaction guides, which frustrates many of the MalPar-As to no end. But given that MalPar-Bs make up 61% of the population on Quidar, 3 out of 21 hardly seems worth mentioning. Back to the point. The problem of Xebob's Ascension review. You see, Xebob grew up in a strange time on Quidar. There were the old-timers, like his grandfather, who thought things had gone too far. And there were the younger Quidarians who thought things hadn't gone far enough. They thought that, under no circumstances, should you darmal a MalPar-B, and that maybe you shouldn't even Disma or Danyar a MalPar-B either, unless you were pretty sure that's what they wanted. Xebob's father was a fairly progressive product of his generation, and disagreed with the grandfather's old ways. Xebob's father taught Xebob that you shouldn't Darmal a MalPar-B unless that's what they wanted, and that they weren't chattel. Xebob's father was less sure about the Disma and Danyar'ed discussions he'd heard going on around work. It seemed to him that if you couldn't Disma or Danyar a MalPar-B whenever you pleased, you might not Disma or Danyar them ever. And then where would you be? Xebob took all these ideas in growing up, and like any young mind, was shaped by them, as well as those of his friends in popular culture. Even as a boy, he was sure Darmal was wrong, as his father had taught him. He was also pretty sure he disagreed with his father, and that it wasn't the end of the world if you couldn't Disma or Danyar with MalPar-Bs unless they wanted you to. He was, he thought, enlightened among his youthful peers. And this takes us back to his dilemma in the hallway, while he's waited for his Ascension review and the question he knows they are going to ask him. You see, it had been all over the news for a week leading up to his Ascension review. A MalPar-B had come forward to say that he had participated in Danyar, boarding on Disma against them when Xebob was 24 cycles old. The problem is, the story was true. When Xebob was young, he had from time to time Danyar'ed. He had, if he was being totally honest with himself, Disma'ed twice, although not nearly as often as his friends had. But he had never Darmaled anyone, he knew that for sure. To be fair, he told himself at the time, practically everyone Danyar'ed and Disma'ed, and the interaction guide was still over 40 cycles away from issuing its landmark proclamation, 2478.47, outlining the new rules on Quidar regarding interactions in this area. What he had done, at least at the time, was permissible by the proclamations in place. Hell, at the time, even Darmal was still allowed. But today was different. Today, even in the backwoods, popular opinion was Darmal was wrong, and most even thought Disma was wrong, even in the uneducated areas. In all the cities, and in all the areas of learning, the matter was entirely decided. All three were wrong, and had always been wrong, going back to the beginning of time, and anyone who didn't know that was either stupid or evil, but probably both. Xebob's opinion on the subject had changed too. He now genuinely agreed with the popular thinking. He agreed that all three were wrong, horrible, in fact. Even if you were trapped on a desert island, as it were, with nothing but him, a MalPar-B, and a life without interaction guide proclamations, he didn't think he would Darmal, Danyar, or Disma a MalPar-B, or anything of the like. And he had always taught his children that Darmal, Danyar, and Disma were wrong, and that they should treat MalPar-Bs as equals. And he was telling the truth when he told the others he was glad MalPar-Bs had a larger role in Quidar society. Quidar was better for it. Some of his best friends, he told himself, were MalPar-Bs, and yet the younger him, the one accused, had believed differently. And so, this was his dilemma, and the reason he sweated, and the reason his heart raced, while he sat in the hallway, waiting for his Ascension review. This is why he was deciding if he should lie, and say the MalPar-B was really the one lying. This was the thing he kept pushing over in his mind. Should he tell the truth and ruin his chances of being accepted to the interaction guide, or should he lie? Discussion questions. 1. In the story, we don't know what Darmal, Danyar, or Disma are. Does it matter what they are in shaping your opinion of if Xebob should lie? What if Darmal is looking at the feet of a MalPar-B? 2. As outlined in the story, do you think Xebob should lie to the Ascension Review Board? What should he do? 3. Is it fair for the Ascension Review Board to consider actions performed by Xebob that were not against Interaction Guide proclamations at the time he did them, but were considered not socially acceptable at the time he did them? 4. From the story, we know that the MalPar-B is telling the truth about Xebob's actions. But what if we didn't know the truth? Should a single refuted accusation keep Xebob from being an Interaction Guide? 5. If Xebob wanted to make amends for his unenlightened prior actions regarding MalPar-Bs when he was younger, what should he do as an adult? Are his youthful actions simply unforgivable? What do you think? Let's continue the discussion on our companion podcast, After Dinner Conversation Discussions, and in the comments section on our website or on Facebook. Links are in the description. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to hear from you soon.